Major support for these broadcasts is provided by Perfect Building Maintenance, New York Community Bank, Chase Commercial Term Lending, Chelsea Lighting, Capital One Bank, Genova Burns, Giantomasi and Webster, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's Window Company, Greenberg Traurig, LLP, M&T Bank. Additional support is provided by Ackman Ziff Real Estate Group, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, Briarwood Organization, Bruce Mosler, Cassidy Turley, C.B. Richard Ellis, Cushman and Wakefield, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Douglaston Development, DDG Partners, Hal Fettner, Durst Fettner Residential, Friedman LLP, Accountants and Advisors, Flushing Bank, Gemini Real Estate Advisors, LLC, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Center at Syracuse University, James Orphanides, Centurion Holdings, Corman Communities, Madison Realty Capital, Margolin Weiner and Evans, LLP, Certified Public Accountants and Business Advisors, Massey Knackle Realty Services, Meridian Capital Group, Newmark Knight Frank, Sterling and Sterling, SJP Properties, Stonehenge Partners, the Wickoff Group, Urban American, and These Friends.
So we have a place. It's called Westchester in Connecticut. It's a market where a lot of people live. Some people even have their offices. There's a lot of retail. But we haven't spoken about it in the last couple of years. So today I've assembled a group of individuals to provide their insight on what's happening in this market. My guests today include David Fiore of Marcus Partners, Mitch Benerofe of Benerofe Properties, Marjan Murray of People's United Bank, Mark Ellman of Celestrial Partners, and last but not least, the man who's helped me produce today's guest show, Robert Weisz of RPW Group. So, Mr. Weisz, you know, you've been in Westchester how many years? In not living, but operating business?
25.
25 years. Mark?
About the same.
You? 40?
90.
What?
Our business started in 1922.
So your family and everybody has been there the longest, and you?
Our business 20 years, me personally 16.
Okay. So how do you see the market today as compared to the last 5 years and the last 10 years? Let's bring it up to the office market because most of the people here are in the office market.
I will say that Westchester is in transition now. The transition is occurring from a very corporate environment to an environment that is more catered to the residents that are in the area. So we have medical, for example, that is expanding dramatically, and that's mostly because empty nesters, instead of moving out of Westchester and going to Florida, they're staying in Westchester. They're just moving from a house to an apartment, and I will guess that one of the substantial changes in Westchester is the fact that a lot of local companies are growing and are developing in the county.
You know, you bring up an interesting point because, I mean, you bought the General Foods headquarters and a lot. I mean, 30 years ago, and Mitch, you and your family have seen it. I mean, we had all these major companies start moving to Westchester, and they took the entire property. They moved. The world changed. You know, they walked out of there. I think one of the few companies of the large magnitude might be PepsiCo with what they have.
And Morgan Stanley.
And Morgan Stanley.
IBM too?
Well,
Right.
IBM,
but in general, a lot of the companies moved and there's been a consolidation and there's a repositioning. And you had to reposition your properties over there. you know, some of the problems that we have in certain markets, especially in Long Island, is people have to sell their homes to downsize their homes. Are there enough new residential towers being built? I know that I believe the Engle-Berman Group, who's the Bristol Assisted Living in Long Island, are coming out and building an assisted living facility in Westchester.
Two of them. One in Armonk, one in White Plains.
Right, so the world is changing. Are people staying in Westchester, okay? Are the housing over there? I mean, because the people who work in the buildings there, most of them live in Westchester. You know, it's like New York City.
I would think that the residential market in Westchester must be the strongest market after New York City in the tri-state. So you have, frankly, two different aspects of the Westchester economy. The residential part is extremely strong. The price of a house during the good years, it was in the mid 700,000 average. Now it's probably somewhere in the 600,000. And even in this environment, you have towns that there is no inventory, that there are more buyers than houses available. At the same time, Westchester is suffering what the entire country is suffering, of a very, very slow economy. So we are getting that impact as well as everybody else. We are finding that there are some industries that are expanding, and such as biotechnology, such as medical world in general, and as we were mentioning before, Life Fitness, for example, is building a brand new facility of 200,000 square feet on a 20-acre site.
You know,
it's a change.
You know, but you bring up Life Fitness, and you know, we have a good situation because we have Marjan, you know, with People's United, which is a $28-30 billion bank, who's a major player in the Westchester, Connecticut marketplace. How do you look at a Life Fitness, which is a total different type of business? I mean, health clubs. It's not a health club. It's an environment. It's like it's an indoor country club, you know, which is perfect because Westchester has so many country clubs.
It's another country club.
It's another country club, but we also, as you know, a number of the clubs closed in Westchester over there. How do you, as a banker, look at a life center over there, and how do you see the market? Because you have to make good loans, and that's what the bank has done over the years.
Yeah, I have to say that's not one of our favorite products, but we will look at it like a CNI loan. We analyze the financials of the tenant.
So you're looking at more as a business loan as opposed to looking at the real estate on that type of thing. And how do you see the, as you know, look, David's company just bought a building in Connecticut. You know, there's somebody you'd like to do business with. How are you looking, because of the 25% vacancy in certain markets that we were talking before about the Stanford market or so on, how do you look at making loans to any of these people, which are the best people that you could do business with anyway, in general, as a banker? How do you look at the market?
There are still buildings that are well positioned. You know, we want to make sure it's not too leveraged. We put a lot of reliance on the sponsor to make sure that the sponsor has...
Right, as opposed to what we were talking about before, you know, certain people in the boom years of 2006, 2007, Wall Street money didn't care. They said if there was an idea or a thought, they would give the money.
Exactly. So that's the key. And also the cash flow, the tenants. We just have to make sure the leverage it's not over leveraged. You know, we sometimes have reserves. Right now we're looking to do a repositioning loan in Westchester because we like the sponsor. And we feel it's going to get leased, and he's going to have a lot of equity in the building. And we fund him good news money. As he leases the building, we keep giving him more money.
Mitch, you know, you and I know each other a long time, but I remember you came to a taping. You weren't on the show. This is the first time I've been able to get you to sit on the set. And we were talking about White Plains and what's happened over there, White Plains, New Rochelle. What's happening in those markets today?
We don't have much of a presence in New Rochelle. We have some presence in White Plains. I think the Central Business District is surviving adequately from an office front. There hasn't been any real new development other than there's a hotel under construction now on Main Street, on the eastern part of Main Street. We have several industrial buildings in town, and it's very, very quiet. It's hard to. It's very competitive for tenants. It's a tenants market. We're doing more for tenants now than we've ever done in the past.
Well, how do you see? I mean, you had the Trump building, you had the hotel over there, enormous amount of retail. How do you see those segments of the market in the White Plains market today?
I know that the new office building that was part of the Ritz project has suffered. I don't know if they've rented any of that. I think
Yes,
that
they
just
did.
changed hands. They must have some tenants in it. 360 Hamilton Avenue does great. The Trump building, you know, I know from familial experience that moving a unit in that building was very, very difficult. Prices I don't think have held up since they first came on the market. So it's a bit soft.
Mark, you've been investing in the Westchester market for many years. How do you see the market today as compared to when you were buying more buildings?
Well, right now, the market is slow. It's slow in Westchester and Fairfield as it's slow everywhere. And I think that's a combination of the normal summer doldrums, plus the uncertainty about the election and budgets and taxes. And basically, I think everyone anticipated this year would be pretty slow. The good news is I no longer see downward rent pressure. I don't see any rent growth, but I don't see rent pressure. The traffic is light, but I think, and a big part of the game these days is tenant retention. If there is no growth in demand for space, the worst thing that you can have is have one of your competitors take your tenant, because the downtime and the leasing commissions and the fit up eat you alive, and all you're going to accomplish is then you'll go take another competitor's tenant.
You know, Marjan was talking about the Harts Mountain, who are friends, and they've been on the show. And about a year and a half ago, I did a show on New Jersey, and it was going to be on the New Jersey office market. And Manny Stern said to me, let's not talk about, because there's not an office market in New Jersey. The key who makes money in the office market in New Jersey is the broker moving one tenant from one building to another building, because otherwise there's nothing happening over there in New Jersey. You're the man from the kid who does lots of business in Connecticut. Now, there have been some big leases over there. What's happening in Connecticut today?
Connecticut's an interesting market in that certainly if you're near a train, which I think is like that probably nationwide, but you're probably doing pretty well. If you've got a building that is in very good shape and has the infrastructure, you're probably doing very well. We're very lucky in that our portfolio is filled with buildings that have the infrastructure and the amenities, where we've actually been very busy. The market in general has continued to be slightly negative, really since October of 2008. It has not gone positive yet, but it's not because companies aren't growing. We certainly have. I think we've grown 3 or 4 companies just this summer. So there is growth out there, but what we've seen is, to offset that growth, the major national companies, international companies, are cutting their square foot per person dramatically. So for every 5 companies that I'm growing, I might be shrinking one that's shrinking by more than those 5 are growing.
Now, what about, you know, the week before I did a show on the office market in New York City. What type of, if you're a company, and I do remember, Greenberg Trauer was on the show, and I said to Rob Ivanhoe a couple of years ago, I said, you moved the number of people from New York City to White Plains. It was a big advantage. There's a big cost savings in Westchester and Connecticut. What type of, what's the difference in rent from Westchester, Connecticut to New York City, and what type of cost do you have to expend on tenant TI or something to bring a tenant to Westchester?
You know, I think that's a very important point you're bringing up. It's never in the 25 years that I'm in the industry, frankly, 25 years in Westchester, over 30 in the industry, the gap has been so dramatic. The rents in Westchester County are less than 1/3 than in New York City. Space that in New York will rent for $80 and $90 a foot, you can probably rent in Westchester for less than 30.
And
with incredible
and you don't have
infrastructure.
occupancy tax, right?
You don't have occupancy tax, you don't have to pay for parking, and you have all the amenities in the world that you probably wouldn't have in a building in New York City. I think what's happening, and I think this is characteristic of the country, the cities are are attracting people. They are kind of a magnet. You see all major cities, Chicago, LA, Atlanta, New York, they're attracting people and the suburbs are hurting. And usually this is a cycle that we go through every so many years. The city becomes the magnet, the rents keep escalating. At one point companies start saying, well, we should move out of the city or we should look at other markets. And that's what's happening in Westchester County. We're getting to the point now that the gap in rent is so dramatic that we see companies coming to look because the discrepancy, not only in rents, the cost of operating in the suburbs is much lower than operating in the city.
But here's a point, and I agree with you 100%. How do you get young people to work in Westchester? Everybody, the reason why we have a vacancy factor on the residential market of less than 2% in New York City, in Manhattan, is because all the young people want to be in Manhattan. They don't say, I want to be living in New Rochelle or Shelton, or, there's no meatpacking district. How do you retain and bring the younger people to Westchester and Connecticut that they didn't know before?
Our tenants that need to do that, and we do have several that do, it's one of the reasons why they're in our parks, because we have so many amenities. I know, Robert, you've done very well with that as well. But we just built a Starbucks on the ground floor of one of our buildings because it was demanded by the tenant, by one of the tenants, that we're competing with Google for employees.
I think there's another point to be made, Michael. It's not just the fact that younger people want to be in the city. I moved into Manhattan when I graduated college. I won't tell you how long ago that was. New York City has never been as good as it is right now. It's clean, it's safe, people, the systems work, and people are not afraid of getting hassled, and so the people are more friendly. As a result, a lot of older people who used to move out are staying in the city these days. And if the decision maker, the president of the company, lives in Manhattan, the company is going to be in Manhattan. Go ahead, Marcia.
I want to talk about Stanford a little bit because I think Stanford has done a fabulous job turning itself to a 24/7 city. I mean, you should go to Stanford like 12 o'clock at night. I mean, the streets are hopping, the bars are open, people are walking around. They have this party every Thursday called Live at 5 on the park. And people are getting on the train and coming from New York City, I'm not kidding, and all over this Connecticut to attend this party.
White Plains has accomplished a lot.
Yeah, so I think
it's really
this is all in the last 10
a
years.
municipal requirement to address the so-called cool factor.
Yeah.
And White Plains is making an attempt at that. There are parts of Mamaroneck Avenue that are very hot socially, close to the station,
Well,
but we got a
frankly,
ways to go.
Downtown White Plains, it's a magnet right now for young people. I agree that cannot compete with New York City. New York City is in a completely different level. But 10 years ago, downtown White Plains, it was completely empty
At 6 o'clock.
at 6 o'clock in the evening. And now, at 10 and 11 o'clock, all the bars are filled. There are many high-end bars and high-end restaurants. The cities, the small cities that are part of the suburbs, are realizing that they needed to do something. And Stanford took the lead. Stanford is certainly the one that has made the turn, and others are following. New Rochelle is trying to do the same thing. So there is a process. I think that I always say that in this industry, the secret is to live long enough, because you just have to be there when the cycles happen, and the cycles you can avoid.
In the same venue of the comment that you made about the office market, the residential market, the cost of living in New York City for a young person is so prohibitive. I mean, you're paying $60, $70 a square foot for rent over here. I mean, you can, Westchester or Connecticut, right?
I also moved to New York City straight out of college, and it was prohibitive then too. I had 2 roommates.
Now you'd need 6 roommates for the same type of rent.
I don't know. I mean, these kids make an awful lot of money coming out of school now, if they can get a job.
Still.
There's an interesting move that's happening with zoning in the city to decrease the minimum size of apartments.
Don't worry. I wrote an article on bunk beds, and somebody said to me, did you read the article about the 300 square foot apartment? I said, no, I just wrote the bunk bed article.
It's a 2-bedroom.
That's right.
That would have been a move up for some of my friends.
Now, something that we discussed before in the green room was the fact that we have in Westchester, and even in certain parts of Connecticut, you have a large number of obsolescent buildings which are being or should be converted to residential. What's happening about that?
There is a very, very strong effort on the part of a number of the municipalities to rezone their infrastructure, and White Plains is doing it and Harrison is doing it. I think that there is going to be quite a bit of that, buildings that will be converted into residential. However, I also think that what we're going to find is that more and more people are going to reposition existing buildings that are obsolete but have good bones, that need new systems, and David mentioned that he was doing that in Connecticut. You're buying a building and you're just taking the infrastructure, but you're turning into what is needed today in terms of power, in terms of amenities, in terms of efficiency, and frankly, that's needed everywhere, including New York City.
Now, very interesting. The Lefracks, who are very successful, they are taking an office building, which is a good location in Queens, right near Forest Hills, and they're converting this entire office building into residential because of the hot market over there.
That's one of the points, Michael, that's very interesting. In terms of the Westchester market, while there hasn't been a huge growth in the numerator of the vacancy equation, there has been a fairly significant shrinkage in the denominator. A lot of buildings are coming off the competitive market, which is hoping to reduce vacancy as well as ultimately increase rents. And then, as Robert said, there are a number of people, Robert being the poster boy, who have bought older buildings which were no longer really competitive and put the money into them to bring them up to date and make them competitive. So the quality of the inventory, particularly in Westchester, because the stock is older in Westchester than it is in Fairfield, is improving, making it more competitive.
Prior to the show, we were talking about retail, and I was a little surprised, I'm not sure who said this, that Westchester and Connecticut is under-retailed.
I did. Frankly, you're talking about 2 counties that have the highest income per capita in the country, together with Beverly Hills and right after New York City. So when retailers look at the demographics, they love Westchester. You have a tremendous concentration because in spite of the fact that housing is comfortable in terms of the amount of land that they have, this is a very, very dense part of the world, and the income that is there is just phenomenal. So one thing that we have seen, and frankly is another aspect of the economy in Westchester County, is the private banking of many of the banks, and Marjan, I'm sure that you are doing your share as well in Westchester, you're seeing how those offices are growing and growing. Now we have very large offices of some of the major banks opening in Westchester to cater to the people that live there that have very high incomes. And those are the same people that are looking to shop. That's why the Westchester Mall does so well, and that's why there is such an appetite for more retail.
The other thing about retail in Westchester is when you look at, it's a supply-constrained market. There are only a limited number of development sites. So if a retailer wants to be in Westchester because of the demographics and the trade area, they have to bend from their national prototype to fit into something that wouldn't work somewhere else. They'll take it to get into Westchester. And that's a sign that it's not over-retailed
How do you-
and it is desirable.
Marjan, how do you see the hospitality market in Westchester, the new hotels? I mean, New York City, we've had 80, 90 new hotels over the last couple of years.
Yeah, that market seems to be pretty hot, but that's not one of our favorite products. And we did one this year for a sponsor that we knew near an office building.
And how do you see the retail market?
Retail, to Robert's point, we see a lot of, we have done several CVS, Walgreens, larger banks, branches, building brand new branches. So it's very active. A lot of banks are expanding, and pharmacy.
Mitch, you know, you said your company's been around since 1922. So here's the question. Do you see some new players like David's company, you know, Marcus Partners coming out? Do you see any new people who, you know, private equity firms or other companies who have not been in Westchester coming to Westchester now? I mean, owners,
I may be
owner
the wrong
developers.
person to ask that question, but truthfully, no. I think that the current establishment of owners like Robert and Mark, I don't see a lot of new faces.
There is some
coming
new
in.
blood
There has to be
coming.
some new blood, but
Yeah.
it's not like there's like a Halpern Stillman coming in, or you know, some big player that's going to make a move in the marketplace.
Now, here's an interesting point, and I'm going to write about this. I noticed, I was doing a little research on the web today. I was looking at Matt Calley's website because I wanted statistics on the Westchester, and I know that they have the statistics from Cushman & Wakefield. And I read a press release where it said that they had done a deal in Jersey City with a residential developer to build something, a residential tower. S.L. Green has done business with Jeff Sutton on retail. So what we're seeing is certain REITs are now diversifying from the core product to other products. Do you see that happening in the Westchester market in Connecticut? Do you think that there's a possibility of that?
Yes, and actually there's rumor that I can't say who. There is rumor that one of the big office REITs is going to buy a huge residential development company, which I think we'll hear about it soon.
I do believe that if the Westchester market right now, you know, in the last year we had UDR come to New York City for the residential market. You've also had AMCO, and I think you're going to see the REITs where they're in the same manner as that they're out of this market. Over here, they want to be close to New York. They want the convenience, and Westchester and Connecticut are the perfect places. A half hour is not an appropriate time for all this. So hopefully when we start the 12th season, I won't be as negligent, and I will have a show on Westchester and Connecticut. I'd like to thank David, Mitch, Marjan, Mark, and Robert. Thank you.